Hello and welcome to the first episode of Your Entrepreneur Success Story under the Entrepreneur Kings and Queens podcast. I'm your host Satvik Sai, and in today's episode we will be featuring CEO and founder of IgnitEDprep, Tanya Bennet. Cue the intro. Welcome, Tanya. It is great to have you here with us today. Let's start, shall we? So, Tanya, please feel free to let us know a bit about yourself and what your company does.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So yes, my name is Tanya Bennet, and I am the CEO and founder of IgnitEDprep. And so IgnitEDprep is a membership community in which we assist people. Our program is designed to assist and connect anyone with the resources that they need to make more money in business. So whether that's starting their own business or trying to elevate sales for an existing business. Our program is a combination of training modules, connecting resources, as well as affordable coaching. I am super passionate about helping people that have very few resources because I feel like oftentimes they're the ones that are forgotten. And a lot of times they have great ideas and they have great things to bring to the table. But again, we all know with little money or little funds, a lot of times they never get a chance to come to a stage. So my background, I have a master's degree in communication, and I also, I started my career in the restaurant industry and operations. So I've managed restaurants in Vegas and Tampa and full service restaurants. And then I kind of switched over into sales and went into hotel sales. So along that path, I worked for a lot of great brands such as Hilton, Ritz-Carlton, Marriott. I was everything from a convention service manager where I was actually detailing and planning the actual events that came in to a sales manager. Eventually, I was a director of sales and was leading teams for hotel.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I've got extensive experience in sales and training. Sales and training are kind of my passion. That's kind of what I do and what I love. And what I realized is when I started my business, I realized that a lot of people are really good at what they do, but if you don't know how to sell your product or service and have someone actually pay money for it, you will never be successful. So I realized that was an aspect missing in a lot of people's businesses and business plans. So that was kind of what inspired me to start my company.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Tanya, for that. That was very inspiring, and thank you, especially hearing your background. It's great to know a bit more about yourself. So I've been talking with you on Clubhouse, especially in the rooms we've been hosting for a while now, but I never fully understood, when did you first get into the idea of entrepreneurship and really start your entrepreneur journey?
That's such a great question. So really, back in the day when I was director of sales for hotels, I actually had a moment where I lost a job, quite honestly. And it's crazy. It's one of those things where you have to be careful what you wish for. I could not wait to be a director of sales in a hotel. And then when I got there, I was miserable because I realized what I thought being a director of sales was going to be, which was motivating people and getting teams to get on board and coach them and elevate them. It turned into I was really just a number cruncher. And it was just a miserable experience for me. So when I lost that job at the time, I was living in Louisiana, and Louisiana is not the metropolis for opportunity. And at that time, I couldn't find any other jobs that was making what I was making. So I then found a company at the time. It was called a meeting consulting. So instead of working at a hotel and bringing events to the hotel, I switched my skill and started working for companies and associations that wanted to host events at hotels. And I helped them find hotels and helped them negotiate their contracts. Once, it was funny, I never thought that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Once I got a taste of it, I loved it. I realized that kind of the things I was going through the motions of life. I realized that I had built my way into a career in which, unfortunately, both of my parents were dead before my son was 2. And I realized that while I was working my way up the corporate ladder, that I didn't spend time with them because I was trying to work my way up the corporate ladder and be something someday. And I realized I was making the same mistake with my son. And being an entrepreneur allowed me to reevaluate those priorities. It allowed me to make sure that I was putting the reason that I wanted to work front and center, which was to have a better life with my family and have more time with my family. So once I became an entrepreneur and I realized that I could master life a little bit better and that I was pretty good at it, I decided that I would rather work 50 jobs than go back to working for one person again. So I went into real estate. I was a meeting consultant. I did consulting for software companies. I did sales consulting for hotels. I would literally work a million different jobs just to prevent me from having to go back and work for them. And I think that it just being an entrepreneur, I loved the fact that, because sometimes when I was in corporate America, I would get so frustrated because sometimes rules were in place that just were stupid. They didn't make sense. And the whole idea was just do it because we tell you to do it. And it was really a disconnect, I think, between leadership and between the middle managers and the actual staff that were doing the job. And I think that the disconnect came from leadership stopped listening to people that were under them. And so they started making rules that they thought looked good on paper, and they would roll this out, and it would create mass frustration. It would burn a lot of people out. And I loved being an entrepreneur in that I found that I was much more productive. When I first started being an entrepreneur, I decided that I had to reward myself before the money started coming in. And I literally didn't work Mondays, and I was off on Friday by noon. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I worked Friday until noon. And I found that I was more productive during that time than I ever was in a full week that I worked in a corporate office. And it just made me realize that I like working smarter, not harder. I liked being able to control my time and not being dictated by other people. And so once I got the taste of that, I knew that was my mission, that I wanted to do it.
Yeah, that's really great, and inspiring, Tanya. Especially, how you mentioned, the corporate might have rules and laws that you didn't like. So, like working as an entrepreneur, you're really working independently. You're not working for someone. You're working for yourself, right? And there are less rules and restrictions as it's more of a free thing since you're the person who owns the company or business. It was really great hearing that. Now, my next question for you is: were there any rough times you faced in your entrepreneurship journey, and were you able to overcome the obstacles?
Oh God, yes. There's always rough times in being an entrepreneur. Obviously I think it was much harder the first time around than it was this time around with my company. The first time around, I was kind of forced into entrepreneurship because, like I said, I couldn't find a job. So I decided that if I wanted to make money, I had to create my own method. But because I had never worked for myself, there was, you hear so many people tell you horror stories of working for themselves, and you hear of so many failures. So I think the biggest struggle of any entrepreneur, usually, especially their first go around, and I notice I said first go around, and we'll get back to that. But I think it's always fear. It's a fear mindset if you're wondering, can I do this? And in a way, you're not even wondering if you can do it. You're telling yourself you can't while you're just doing it. And so getting through that and working through that point is really, really hard. Then I think also figuring out the plan, like, because you're responsible for bringing in money, and if you don't figure out a way to discipline yourself, to schedule yourself, to actually schedule your day around intention, and really handle time management, you will not be as successful as quickly. I think another item that I find a lot of entrepreneurs, when I didn't learn till later, but it's definitely important to have multiple income streams coming in, because anything can happen in that one income level that is coming in. So you want to, the more income streams by a variety of different things that you have happening, the more stability I think that you create. So yeah, I think staying motivated until the money starts coming was another big thing for me, which is why I created other reward systems around that so that I could keep myself going. But I think the first time around, the hardest part is fear. And when I said the first time around, I think it's because the hardest thing for a lot of people to do when starting their own business is to start. And the message that I always like to is what you start with is not going to be what you end with. And you just need to know that and accept that and be okay to evolve with it. And then you can typically go with the flow a little bit better. There's kind of a surrender aspect to it. If you are trying to control every move because your vision is so strong that sometimes you're trying to control the outcome, and you're literally, one of my favorite sayings is, you're tripping over dollars to make pennies because you're just so tied to an outcome that isn't even working for you and you're ignoring it.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya, for that. I really liked, especially how you said that phrase earlier. Especially you were mentioning, work smarter, not harder, obviously, as well. And just a little bit, maybe you could go in and explain a bit about how you believe you've improved from the beginning of your journey to now, especially since you mentioned there were in the journey you had obstacles you overcome, of course, eventually. But maybe you can mention a bit about like how you think you've overall improved as an entrepreneur and for your business as well.
Sure. I think the overall improvement is kind of knowing what made it different this time around with building my company is I knew what to expect. I knew the waves of fear were going to come. I knew the doubt was going to come. And those are real realities that you cannot ignore when you're starting any business. For me, I knew when I first started my business, this company this time around, I am not even exaggerating. There were days that I was meditating 4 hours a day because I was trying to get myself through that fear zone. I was trying to push myself because I knew that place can be self-defeating. I think that another thing, again, learning multiple income streams is definitely helpful. One of the biggest things that I don't think that I did the last time around that I'm doing this time around, which has made it so much more of an enjoyable path as well, is realizing how beneficial and rewarding collaboration can be. One of the biggest things about being an entrepreneur or a small business, which was part of the reason that inspired my company that I've created now, is I realized that oftentimes we are kind of on an island and we feel like we are isolated by ourselves, that we don't have all of the answers, we don't have support, we don't necessarily know where to go. And one thing that I have found this time around is by admitting I don't have all the answers, and nor do I want to have all of the answers, but by building a network so massive that if I don't have the answer, I can find someone that does. It's really it's a comforting feeling. It gives me confidence because, again, I don't feel that I have to know everything, but to be able to be that connector and that bridge that has resources that can find the answer. That's kind of the same attitude that I had in corporate America. When someone would ask me a question about a service or a product that I was offering, if I didn't know the answer, my answer was always like, I'm not sure about this, but let me find out. And then I would dig until I found the right answer. I think that kind of still goes for being an entrepreneur is you need to build a network around you for success so that you have people to rely on for your weak points. One of my big things is, my strength is my vision. There is no doubt about it. And sometimes I didn't even realize how big my vision is. My weakness is details. I can have a vision all day, every day. If you don't have the details to kind of help guide you down that vision to execute, you will be on a hamster wheel. And I have recognized and realized that I have to surround myself by people that have those types of details or that have that type of vision that can still see my vision. And that's also something important. You don't want to surround yourself by people that are telling you you're smoking crack all the time, because sometimes my visions are big and it would be easy for someone to say that. But more so to respect my vision, but help me recognize how to scale it on a smaller level so that it can be achievable. So I think the biggest lesson that I've learned is resources, is not isolating yourself, not putting the pressure on yourself to know everything, but building a network that you have people to rely on so that you're not alone all the time. And Clubhouse has been a wonderful platform to do just that.
Hey, sorry, Tanya. Could you just repeat that last like 1 minute of what you said? Because you kind of cut off there a little bit.
Sure. I just lesson is just making sure that you surround yourself by a network so that you're not isolated, that you have people to call on so that you truly don't feel alone, and it will help you to be more successful. And I think that kind of what I had said is Clubhouse, to me, Clubhouse has been an amazing platform to do just that, to meet people all over the world that can help me see things outside of my own little horizon, which makes me better, and it'll be more proactive as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tanya, for that. And I really agree with you, especially on Clubhouse. I mean, that's how I met you, of course, too. It's a really good platform to network, especially right now. Now, coming back to the vision thing, I also agree with you. I've had many visions, but it's whether you actually execute that vision or not, that matters as well. Going back a little bit to what you said about the fear part, so many entrepreneurs, especially new entrepreneurs, have that problem of the fear of starting their business and really don't know what to do and how to execute on their business. So if you could give one piece of advice or a little bit of advice to these brand new entrepreneurs, what would it be?
To start. That's the biggest piece of advice I can give you. I think so many times people do have this big vision, and so then they sit there and they go back and forth of it has to be so perfect before I can pitch it, before I can present it, before I can try to get someone to buy it. You can stay in that, especially perfectionists can stay in that space for months and never launch it. So you just have to start. Like, you have to put something out. For me to get to that place, when I was extremely overwhelmed, I realized that I had to create smaller goals and chip away at it. So I had to create, if I had a huge goal, I had to look at, okay, what is it going to take me to get there? And if that's the case, what are some items that I can do each day that are going to get me there? And I call it, for lack of a better word, it's the underachievers plan. Because there's a reason behind that madness. If I am making goals for myself, much like a lot of people when they're trying to lose weight or when they're trying to work out, I always look at it, and I did that too. Like, I lost 50 pounds. And but I realized when I wanted to lose 50 pounds, I would start, and let's say we do what everyone does. They'll take a day, 2 days where they eat great, right? And then they get on the scale, and maybe they lost a pound or didn't lose anything. And then all of a sudden they're defeated. They feel like a failure. And so what do? They're like, screw it, I'm going and eating Mexican food tonight, and I'm, ice cream. And then they never get on any kind of path to success. What I found and realized on that journey was that 50 pounds is a massive goal. And that is a goal that I am not going to see the results on overnight. In fact, even if I lost 7 pounds, it still wouldn't feel great because 50 is so massive. I realized that I needed to set my goals around action items, because that is something that I could say, yes, I did, or no, I didn't. And I had complete control over. So for example, when I was trying to lose weight, that goal would be, I am going to cook a healthy meal 2 times a week, and I am going to hit the gym twice a week. And I call it the underachievers plan, because so many times people are like, I'm going to eat salad 7 days a week, and I'm going to go to the gym 7 days a week. If you're not doing that all day, every day, that is not sustainable. You will never do it. So in order to set yourself up, there's a psychology behind it, that if you aim low, but you're just starting, once you achieve that and you check it off, your mind is saying, oh my gosh, look what I just did. I can do this. And you kind of feel like a badass. You're like, yeah, I did it. And that makes you want to keep doing it. And then as you achieve, like, let's say you go through 3 weeks where you ate great and you went to the gym that 2 days a week, then you can add another day on, because now you're getting some momentum. But if you never start, you never get momentum. And you cannot start at these massive, crazy goals. I tell my clients all the time, if you have any hesitation with committing to do something, then that goal is way too high. You need to take it down, because the only way to get started and to overcome that fear is to slowly inch in and start building your confidence. It's kind of like when a baby learns to crawl. Like, they're trying to figure out how to walk. They have to crawl first. You couldn't just set them down and say, okay, walk from the living room to the kitchen. Like, you kind of have to guide them. They have to learn and become easy on their feet, and they have to have something to hold on to a little bit before they can move forward. It's the same premise with starting your own business. You have to be able to see the small steps are going to add up to the big steps. But if you stop yourself and never start because the steps seem so big, you'll be on the hamster wheel nonstop.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya, for that. I really like your mindset, and I really agree with everything you said. You don't want to make the goals really big and unrealistic as well. So I really agree with what you said. So going back to what you said, Tanya, you said you worked in the corporate field as well, right? So what do you think distinguishes an entrepreneur from the corporate worker? Or what do you think compares and doesn't compare from when you were a corporate worker versus when you're an entrepreneur now? I know you talked a bit about it earlier, but maybe you could go in a bit more depth and detail on what you think is a distinguish between the both.
Oh, absolutely. And I love this. So one thing that I think I have learned as I've become an entrepreneur is the telltale sign that someone is an entrepreneur in the corporate world is they're never satisfied. They're the ones that drive their bosses crazy. They're the ones that are constantly asking, why do we have to do it this way? Why? I don't understand. Why? And their bosses are just like, shut up and just do it. I was always that person. Okay. I think I also see in entrepreneurs, an entrepreneur would never be able to stay in a job for a long period of time. They get bored too quickly. They can't stay in a job for 10, 15 years. Most entrepreneurs jump around anywhere, I think, from 2 to 4 years. When I look at my resume, I jumped around 2 to 4 years. Now, granted, I was always moving up, but I still jumped around. And a lot of it was because corporate America was not designed to elevate people on performance based on their ability to perform. It was more designed of these archaic philosophies, and you have to earn your time. And so people like me and other entrepreneurs had no time for that crap. And so if the companies we were with couldn't see that, we would leave there and go to companies that would. So I can always tell when an entrepreneur when I look at a resume, I can usually tell that someone has been an entrepreneur based on that. I also think that it's important to recognize that not everyone can be an entrepreneur, nor does everyone want to be an entrepreneur. And I think that much like in the corporate world, in the world in general, that's good. We need some people that, like, if the whole world was like us, the entrepreneurs that were constantly, looking for the next thing and looking to constantly elevate, we would almost probably never accomplish anything. We need to surround ourselves by some of those people that are the steady eddies, that really just want to go into work. They want to do their job. They take pride in doing their job. They don't really have those ambitions to take over the world. There's a place for them too. And I always like to make sure that I highlight that, because also those people, if they found themselves being an entrepreneur, they might succeed if they found something that they were extremely passionate about. But if they didn't, their chances of being successful, of the ups and downs of an entrepreneur, they're not built or designed for it. And there's nothing wrong with that, because a lot of us need to surround ourselves by those types of people as well. So I feel like that the more and more that I built businesses, or that even when I was in corporate America, always found that surrounding myself by a team that had what I didn't have always made me stronger. So if I had a team that were full of type A personalities like me, my God, it would be exhausting, one. And we'd never get anything done. I needed to surround myself by some people that loved details, even though it drove me up a wall to be in the room with them while they were thinking through those details. It was a necessity for us to move forward, because you cannot ignore what details are needed to be successful. And so I think that where corporate America sometimes misses the mark is that they don't train leaders how to be leaders. People get into leadership just because they have performed. And then when they get into leadership, they have no idea what to do. The other thing I think is that they don't necessarily take into account, again, like I had said, I did work for a company, Top Golf, and it was one of the best corporate cultures I've ever worked for anywhere. But what I loved about them, they had one saying, and it was one size fits one. And I loved that, because you didn't have to be in a certain position for 5 years or in order to apply for another. if you had the skill set and you had the potential to be in that position, and you had maybe only been in your position for a year, they would consider you. I loved that. I felt that that was a way to create a thriving culture. That was a way to make sure that everyone felt like they were a necessary part of the equation and that they all had a chance to be heard, to be seen. And it definitely, I felt like that company truly also had a way of incorporating accountability into their own systems. Because of the way that they hired, they ensured that the people that came on board were kind of these overachievers that would hold themselves to a higher level anyhow. So, like, a group accountability was just the expectation. It wasn't something we had to create after we had hired the wrong people. We did a very good process of bringing people on to ensure that they were in line with the culture that we were trying to build. And I think out of every company I've ever worked for, that company did it the best.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tanya, for sharing that. Especially, thank you for mentioning that phrase, one size fits one. I really like that phrase you got from Top Golf. Especially, I didn't know you worked for Top Golf. I've heard of them. You're talking about the Top Golf, the famous golf company that's has different like areas where you can play golf in the whole U.S. If I'm correct.
Yeah, all over the world. They were just bought by Callaway.
Oh, okay. All right.
I opened their venues here in Baton Rouge as the director of sales.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much, Tanya, for that. That was really great for mentioning that. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and come up onto the stage, and we'll be glad to answer your questions. But rather than that, I noticed, for IgnitEDprep, you provide a service where you help small businesses. Maybe you can mention a bit more about your company and really what you do to help the small businesses.
Sure thing. So I was inspired for IgnitEDprep by the premise of when the pandemic happened, and I realized, having been in the hospitality industry, I watched a lot of my friends and colleagues lose their jobs what felt like in a minute. Overnight, all of their jobs were gone, and it really affected me. It affected me in one way because I knew it was obvious at that time that the mass amount of those jobs weren't all going to come back. And I knew in that moment that some people were going to have to recreate themselves. I also knew in that moment that many of the people that I had worked with that were brilliant, that had worked for a Marriott or for a Hilton or for other corporate companies for 10, 20, 30 years, did not have the confidence in themselves to think that they had the skill set to run their own business. So I knew that there was going to have to be a mindset shift at that point. And then also something else that really, as the pandemic kind of lingered on, it became very evident as to the people that were hurting the most from that. It seemed like the people that were poor were getting a lot more poor. And the resources that were available to them were almost non-existent. And so I truly felt like that's where my heart was led, that I needed to find a way to impact those people that had all of these experiences in different worlds, in their different jobs, and that they needed to kind of recreate an identity for themselves, but they couldn't do it alone. They needed some guidance. And at first, I thought that was going to be with me being a coach. And I had kind of started a coaching, or I signed on with a coaching program. And I didn't feel comfortable with the pricing. And I also, meaning that I just personally felt that the pricing was too high. And I always like to reflect on that moment, because a lot of people are like, oh, you're worth it. And it was never a question of whether I thought I was worth getting that money. I know I'm worth getting that money. It was more a question of, can I truly help people that need the help the most desperately at that price point? And because the answer to that was no, I, with good integrity and good intentions, could not continue down that path. And then I didn't like also the selling strategy that a lot of these coaching programs have, which is it's a psychology behind it. They schedule these calls with you and they have you, tell your deepest fears, your deepest vulnerabilities, what you're afraid of, what your pain points are. And one thing about me is I have a way of making people feel safe that they will be vulnerable with me. And these programs were kind of teaching that they wanted you to have them reveal that. Then you would deliver the price. And then I would hear on the other line, on the end of the phone, these people's dreams as they sighed. And it was like they just were defeated. And then I was expected to tell them if they wanted it bad enough, they could do it. And so I struggled with, so let me get this straight. They can't afford me. And now I'm going to shame them because they can't afford me. And then I'm just going to leave them high and dry. And it really bothered me. I lost sleep at night, and I knew that I could not function in that world. And I also knew, as I looked at other coaching programs, that nothing existed for the type of client that I was looking for. And quite honestly, if I'm very honest, it was like the first time around when I was an entrepreneur, it was me. I remember being on the phone with some of these coaches and just crossing my fingers and closing my eyes, hoping that they would say a price that I could afford. And they never did. It was always way more than I could afford. And I really used to get angry about people saying, well, if you wanted it bad enough, you could do it. Because I got to tell you, I'm 45 years old. I have a master's degree. I have worked my way up in my career. But I also, as soon as I finished graduate school, 9/11 happened. So jobs weren't aplenty. Then I got into sales. As soon as I got into a sales role, the 2008 crash happened. Then I made the most money I'd ever made in my life in 2019. And then the pandemic happened. Both of my parents, like I said, were dead by the time I was 2 years old. So my whole career has been this roller coaster of feast, famine. Never have I had that savings, the magical savings that everyone told you that you need to have 6 months of savings in case you lose your job. And then I'm like, even if I did have it, this pandemic has lasted over a year. So I just realized that I'm not the only person in the world that didn't buy into this nonsense. And I was getting tired of the masses of the coaching industries and the financial advisors and everyone preaching to a choir that really only affected the top 3% in the world. And I just decided that if someone is going to make a change, I've got a big mouth. I know that I've got the skill set. I know that I've got the background. Why not me? It started, I don't even know how it started. It kind of just manifested into this. And, manifestation is something that I think has been a part of this process. But it's been a remarkable journey seeing how it's gotten exactly to this point. And I've never been more confident and certain for success because I just know it is just a service that needs to happen. People need help right now. And they shouldn't have to take money out of their child's mouth to pay someone else to get help. That just should not be allowed. So I just decided that I see abundance in helping the masses. And I think that there's enough abundance for all of us if we help the masses.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tanya, for mentioning that. Especially, it was great to hear how, you had rough patches, of course, in your life. Many things happened. Like you mentioned, the crash of the market in 2008 and everything that happened. But you were able to eventually overcome it and become successful to what you are now, especially with your company, IgnitEDprep. Now, what do you think is a common misjudgment people see in entrepreneurs? For example, there might have been a time where people might have told you that, oh no, you doing your company is a terrible idea. You should go back to doing a corporate job. So what do you have to say to those people? What do you think you would say in your honest opinion about like what entrepreneurship is, and to the people who are skeptical, especially when it comes to people doing their own businesses?
Oh Lord, I was just told last week, someone told me that I should try to get another job, and one of my friends. The thing that I will tell you is that before you start this journey as an entrepreneur, you have to be grounded in knowing the why you're doing it and the purpose. Because if you don't know that, you will be swayed by all that nonsense. You will. It's easy to go into that fear. It's easy because we have it anyways. Even now, where I'm 100% sure of the success of my company, but those days happen where the fear pops up. I'm human, right? But this time around, because I am so crystal clear on my vision and on my purpose, there is no swaying me to tell me that it's not going going to work. So I think that's one. I think the other thing is a lot of people talk about visualization and visualizing doing vision boards and manifest. I think what has made the difference this time for me personally is that every other time that I had done vision board, my vision boards revolved around me. They were, I want the pretty house with the big pool and the big car and the this and the that. For some reason this time, because it was so much bigger than me, and I guess because I was so deeply affected by what I was seeing in the pandemic, my vision boards this time had nothing to do with me. My vision boards this time really focused around the people that I wanted to help and the need that I saw and how I saw doing it. So, prime example, one of my vision boards, the first vision board that I created it's a bird coming out of the water trying to fly. And then I've got hands that are holding that, hands holding each other because I know that you have to help people to get there. And then I've got a picture of me releasing a bird into a flock of other birds because, again, to be successful, you need to be in a community and a network. I also have a vision board that is filled with women of color because I know for me, one of the things that has impacted me over the last, I think, year, 2 years, as obviously in the United States, we have seen a civil rights movement like no other that is definitely needed. And I have a Black son. And I think for me in the past year, having that recognition of seeing Black women and how they have been ignored and not listened to and quite honestly not treated well, whether it was in professional communities or anything. I knew that my calling involves including them at my table, weaving them in all levels of my company to ensure that we reach the people and the markets of people that I know need the help the most. And so I literally have a vision board reminding me that they need to be incorporated and included in as many of my strategies and within my company as possible if I'm ever going to succeed at the rate that I want to succeed. And so I think having those kinds of vision boards where it's bigger than you, it's not about you. I think that sometimes we get caught up in manifestations because we turn into selfish and greedy. I don't think that that's the purpose of vision or purpose. I think every one of us has a purpose that is meant to be bigger than ourselves. And if you can't manifest from that place, I don't know if you'll ever reach your true potential. Because just the word purpose in general is not a selfish word. The word purpose is about others. And so I think that is my best advice for any entrepreneur. You need to figure out that purpose of your business. And what is it? Yes, we all want to make money. Yes, none of us want to be poor. Yes, we've got families. And yes, there has to be some me in that. But what is it that is so big that you just can't stop, that you cannot turn away because it's bigger than you? If you identify that I think keeps you going when everyone is telling you to stop, when even life is telling you to fail. That is the thing that will keep you accountable to yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tanya, for mentioning that, especially the advice you gave to entrepreneurs. And you talked about, the purpose and really that advice. Really, thank you for that. And now you're talking, going back a little bit to earlier when we said the advice you give to new entrepreneurs, you're talking about strategies and tactics, right? So what specific strategies or tactics would you give to the brand new entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs who are wanting to be entrepreneurs, but of course they didn't necessarily start the brand or business yet? What are some of the strategies or tactics you would want to tell them about?
Sure. I think that the biggest thing that I see from people that are looking to start their own business usually is defining exactly what they're going to do. And I think that part of the process sometimes gets rushed, it gets ignored. And I think that they immediately go to trying to advertise on Facebook and trying to do all of these things before they have their actual messaging right. And that messaging is truly the first step of any single business. So you should be able, when someone asks you, what do? You should be able to tell them in 90 seconds. And then they should be able to understand it well enough that they would want to learn more. If they have to continue to ask you questions because they don't understand what it is, then your messaging is not good enough to start yet. The process of getting to that message is what some of my training programs have for IgnitEDprep is, we talk about truly thinking again about what is your purpose, who do you want to help, what is, it takes some work of identifying who are your competitors, who else out in the world has what you do. And regardless of, you want to compare, what do they have that you don't, what do you have that they don't. You want to compare the pricing. You want to figure out, because the answer to your messaging lies somewhere in that place. And that's a good place to start the process and getting the brainstorming. But I think too often, I think a lot of businesses fail because their messaging was never clear. And I can't even tell you how many times that I talk to people, especially coaches. I love me some coaches because obviously coaches are trying to impact the world. They want to make the world a better place. But when I ask them, who's your target market? And they say everyone. Ding, ding, ding. I already know we have a problem, because you can't be everything to everyone. You have to truly define what unique skill set you have and who it caters to the best to see if you are going to be successful. And I just think that is a link that a lot of people miss when they're trying to start their own business.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tanya, especially for mentioning the strategies and tactics and mentioning everything you just mentioned. Now, another question I have for you is, so you've been here for longer, when it comes to your age, you mentioned as well. So how would you say entrepreneurship, I know you weren't necessarily an entrepreneur like maybe in the 90s or early 2000s, but how would you say entrepreneurship has changed compared to the early 2000s and maybe the 90s to now, if you do happen to know by any chance?
Ouch, Suffolk, ouch. I am 45, brother. I graduated from high school in 93, so I wouldn't know how business was in the 90s. Although I will say, I don't think, especially I grew up in Kentucky, and so I will say, I don't think that a lot of people at that time, what I saw around me was a lot of people that we were told, go to college, get a job, and the American dream can be yours. All right. And so we bought into a lot of it. And I feel that a lot of people my age now that are, anywhere from that 40 to 50 mark realize that the American dream, I hate to say, it was a lie. It was never meant for us. It was meant to be achieved on our backs. It was never meant for us to achieve all of the glory that we thought we were going to achieve. We fought it. We wanted to believe that there was a place for us up in that corporate setting, but we were never going to be invited to the table. Most of us, 90% of it. What I see now, and it is so refreshing to me, is millennials, younger generations, quite honestly. They are because I think the younger generations, the millennials, all they have known is disruption. That's all they've seen, I think. They demand transparency. They weren't, for me, when I was coming up through corporate America, I remember we were always told, you don't talk about what you make. Well, of course not. They didn't want us to talk about what our salary was because they knew damn well they weren't compensating us fairly. And they knew that there was no rhyme or reason for how they were compensating us. Millennials weren't having any of that crap. They were holding them to the table of, no, you're not going to do this. We are going to talk about it. We are going to put you on the spot. We are going to make you feel uncomfortable. And lo and behold, they've changed it. I can't tell you how many people I speak to on a weekly basis that are millennials that have never even stepped foot in working for a corporate office because they saw that their skill set and that their ability to live the life that they wanted to live didn't revolve around corporate values and corporate structures. I wish that I would have seen that earlier. I wish that I would have known that earlier. So that's why, for me, I truly do try to surround myself by, I love working with younger generations because they question me, which a lot of times remember what I told you earlier in the beginning, that good entrepreneurs always question. They're never satisfied.
Yeah.
That's the younger generation in general. That's what y'all do. And I love that because it makes me question myself. It makes me question, is this maybe the best solution or not? I will tell you something that has blown me away from being on Clubhouse is, even in the rooms that we host on Saturday, seeing these kids get up on stage that are 15 and 16 years old, that are getting ready to go to college and are asking about starting their own business. And I reflect back to these moments of, these kids would never have this opportunity if they were trying to do this in a corporate setting. Corporate, one, probably wouldn't even hire them because they weren't of age. And two, they would never take them serious. When I hear them on stage asking their questions and their vision, they're right on. So the fact that we are now opening the stage for more people, and I think that also plays into when you look from a global impact of, not every country obviously operates like the United States of America, and where you have some countries out there where the children are forced to work much younger, to provide resources to those kids, to let them get a head start. That's where I start seeing the abundance and changing the world, quite honestly. So it really inspires me to see that right now, to see that younger people are finding their ground, even more inspired to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tanya, for that, especially your comment on that. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring in age much there, but yeah. Anyways, if anyone would like to ask a question, feel free to do so now. You can just raise your hand and come and ask a question. Otherwise, we'll move on to the last question of today's session. Yes, Alan, I have invited you a speaker. Welcome to the stage, Alan. Feel free to ask your question.
Thank you for bringing me up here, Suffolk. So my question for you, Tanya, is, so yesterday, me and Suffolk, we recorded the first session of my podcast, and one of the things we talked about is what separates, wannabe entrepreneurs from, the ones who actually go out and take action. And one of the things we talked about was like entitlement. That's what kind of separates the two. What do you think about that? I just wanted to quickly get your thoughts on that.
If I'm honest with that question, I think privilege, honestly. I think that I see a lot of people that have started businesses, but it's much easier to start a business when you have money, when you have a family that is going to support you, when you don't have to worry about keeping a roof over your head, when you have, something to fall back on if you don't make it. I think that's what separates entrepreneurs right now. And that's exactly why I created my company, is because I don't think that should be what separates entrepreneurs right now. I feel that if we equal out that playing field, then we'll have a better answer. But right now, I can't tell you in good faith that I think that every business fails just because the person wasn't cut out for it. Because quite honestly, I think a lot of people have failed that were damn good at what they did. They just didn't have the resources to keep at it. And unfortunately, I think our culture shames them for that. And that bothers me a lot, because I think that we have probably lost a lot of brilliant ideas and brilliant solutions, all because the playing field wasn't equal.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tanya, for that answer. Alan, I hope that answered your question. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask.
No, so thank you, Tanya. It was definitely very interesting to get your perspective on that as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Alan, for coming up onto the stage. Now, getting on to our last question of today's session is, you really mentioned how you thought Clubhouse was a great app to network, and especially during this pandemic era and the beginning of 2020, when the pandemic all started, people started shifting more and more to social media. So what do you have to say, and what's your opinion on apps like Clubhouse and Instagram and LinkedIn, all these apps to network? What's your say on that, especially when it comes to businesses and entrepreneurs?
So I think, honestly, Clubhouse was a refreshing addition to platforms, because honestly, I think what we saw during the election and during, this I think it's been a global chaos that we've seen, let's face it, for the last few years. There's been global chaos everywhere. And I think that Facebook, sadly, not Facebook, maybe even Twitter, have been vacuums that have allowed people to vomit their beliefs and thoughts with zero consequences, because it isn't an interactive platform. Yeah, you can comment, but come on. It's very easy to spew hate and all of these crazy opinions from a platform behind a computer where no one can see you, right? What I've seen that I like about Clubhouse is that Clubhouse, even though you don't see like our live faces, it's a live voice. And I still think that it does, for the most part, make people proceed with still a little bit more caution. And so what I like about Clubhouse is that it is more of this global connection where it's more of an opportunity to be exposed to horizons and opportunities that maybe we wouldn't have, not even maybe, that we would not have if we didn't have this platform. Prime example, Richard that's in the audience, he lives in Australia. We just started a podcast on Friday. I live in Louisiana in the United States. He lives in Australia. So we are basically two worlds that are colliding from completely across the globe. I never would have had that kind of opportunity or exposure to broaden my horizons if it weren't for Clubhouse. Now, where I think that the other social media platforms play into Clubhouse is that to be effective on Clubhouse and to actually meet that networking potential, you have to utilize the other social media platforms for that. And so obviously with Clubhouse, it's Instagram. I don't know of a lot of people that utilize Twitter. It seems to be Instagram is the big one, because it allows you to message directly and follow people's stories, and it's still about the emotional feeling. And I think that that's what we're all longing for. We're longing for that connection, that vibe. This pandemic took a toll on us, and I think Clubhouse came around at the perfect time to connect us and make us see the similarities that we all share. Now, I think LinkedIn, what I have found for my own business purposes, Instagram is where I typically find my clients. That's typically where I connect with them, where I see what's important to them, where they see what's important to me. And then I think LinkedIn is not for me, because of the way my model is based. LinkedIn is kind of where I'm going to find resources to help my clients. So it's definitely, I need to utilize both spaces, but I'm very clear on the intention behind both spaces, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense, Tanya. And thank you especially for bringing up your points on Clubhouse and LinkedIn, especially your opinions on Instagram. And I actually agree with you. When it comes to the Facebook and that, I'm not really sure how they are doing, especially now. More people are using Instagram over Twitter and social media. Especially, I like how you mentioned Clubhouse, because, that's how we met, right? Especially Alan as well. We do our weekly sessions. We met through Clubhouse. Otherwise, I wouldn't have met you. So it was really nice, especially since you get the idea to meet and network with new people, especially entrepreneurs and people in your specific niche. It's great that we are utilizing this app for doing many rooms such as this podcast we're doing right now, especially to network. With that said, if anyone else in the audience has any questions, feel free to ask your question now. Okay, looks like then nobody has any questions. Thank you, Tanya, for taking your time out of your day to come and speak in the podcast. Anyone that's listening to this podcast and anyone on YouTube, Spotify, or SoundCloud, wherever the podcast will be, please feel free to follow her social medias in the links below, and on Clubhouse as Tanya Bennet, and her username is at IgnitEDprep. It will be in the links in the description below, so please feel free to follow her. Thank you all so much for tuning in to today's session. We'll have more guest speakers in our next sessions and episodes coming up. With that said, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on our podcast platforms. And if you're on Clubhouse, feel free to follow our club, the Entrepreneur Kings and Queens Club, and we will be adding more people as members as they follow us. With that said, thank you so much, Tanya, for joining today's session, really speaking and giving out your message and telling us a bit about yourself and really what your thoughts were on all the questions I had asked you. Thank you so much, Tanya.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And don't forget, I mean, we do a session every Saturday too at 3 p.m. Eastern. So that's where we always have a Q&A session as well for entrepreneurs. And then I also have two clubs, the Path to Purpose and Entrepreneur Startup. So please make sure you're checking in on those clubs to see for any good speakers or sessions, clubs that we're having. And yeah, thank you. I appreciate this. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, as Tanya mentioned, everyone that's not necessarily listening on Clubhouse, you can also listen on YouTube as well. So anyone watching on YouTube or any of the podcast platforms, if you're on Clubhouse, please feel free to join our sessions 3 to 4 p.m. EST under the Hustler Club. It is a entrepreneur networking and Q&A session. So please feel free to join us. With that said, thank you all so much for tuning into the podcast. I'm Satvik Sai, the host of today's Entrepreneur Kings and Queens show. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.